And we've arrived now at session 5 for Unified English Braille for Vision Professionals. We've talked about various modes so far. In the previous session, we've talked about capitalization, which can be considered a mode, and we talked about grade 1 mode. Today we're going to talk about another mode called numeric mode. And we've had numeric mode all along, just like we had capitals mode and a version of grade 1 mode in EBAE. But again, UEB is much more formal about these things, just like we've had roots and prefixes before with, say, a .5 in front of an S, making that S read the word sum. We've had prefixes and roots all along, and we've had modes all along. We're just being more systematic about it with UEB. Numeric mode is a little interesting in the code book of UEB because, again, this is an international code, and so it's written for more than just we here in the United States. So to us, some of the terminology and the wording might be a little weird, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we go along. First of all, a couple of vocabulary words. A decimal sign is whatever is being used for a decimal. And again, here in the United States, and I believe Canada, we use a point, a period, for the decimal sign, whereas in other countries, European countries and elsewhere, they use a comma. So when the UEB codebook is talking about decimal signs, they're talking about whichever way you do it in your country, not necessarily a point. And also a full stop is what we would call a period. So when they're talking about a full stop in numbers, they're talking about that decimal point that we use here in North America. These 12 signs on the screen number 3, are the 10 digits and the 2 symbols which represent the decimal sign, either the point or the comma. So those are the 12 symbols that are called numeric indicators. That means that numeric mode is set when these symbols are used. And at first I was very confused when they were talking about it like this, but the trick is to not view these as A, B, C, D, E, etc. with a number sign in front of it. That's not how UEB works. Again, we're talking about roots and prefixes, and so the prefix then is dots 3, 4, 5, 6. And the root then is .1 or .12 or dots 1, 4, etc. So that's why UEB says that these 12 symbols are set numeric mode, that they are numeric indicators because they have that prefix in front of them. So it's considered a unit, not two separate cells. And I believe I've talked about this screen already, yes. So numeric indicators set numeric mode for the remainder of the symbol sequence. And that sounds pretty universal, but actually most symbols will terminate numeric mode. The few that don't are on this screen. The 10 digits, of course, we wouldn't want to start numeric mode and then have them stop once you put a numeral in place. Or the decimal point, you wouldn't want numbers to stop at a decimal point, or a comma. This is something called a simple numeric fraction line. We'll talk about that later in this session. A new thing called the Numeric Space, and line continuation indicators. So just these 6 things will allow numeric mode to continue through. Anything else will stop numeric mode. So here are some examples of just regular old numbers first, starting off slow. We have the number 62, or 3,500 with a comma there, so numeric mode continues through. We don't need another numeric indicator in front of that 5 after the comma. That makes sense. 8.93, or as they would do elsewhere, 8 looks like comma 93, but still 8.93. And the same thing with the last 2 examples. There's the North American way and the every other place way, 0.7. So as I said, a space or any other symbol not listed in that list that we just talked about in 6.2.1 terminates numeric mode, which means it has to start up again with that numeric mode indicator. That means that some things work just the opposite as they did in EBAE. For instance, 9 to 10 in the old code, that hyphen didn't stop the dots from being read as numbers. We didn't really have something called a numeric mode, but for ease of talking about it, I'll just call it that. So in EBAE, the old code, we could just have 9 hyphen and then carry on with the digits without repeating the numeric indicator. In UEB, though, a hyphen is not on that list of things that numeric mode carries through, so we have to reinstate numeric mode for that second number after the hyphen, number 10. The opposite then is also true. So if we have an 8-cab fleet, that hyphen terminates numeric mode. So that means we're not talking about numbers anymore after the hyphen. We're talking about letters or contractions or other symbols or what have you. In the old code, we would have read that as 312. But in UEB, it's the opposite. So we have 8 hyphen. Numeric mode has just been terminated, so that's read as CAB. 7 with a 2 in parentheses. Again, the parenthesis is not on that list of things that numeric mode carries through, so that terminates numeric mode. That means whatever is inside the parentheses needs, if it's a number, needs to be designated as such with a numeric mode indicator. But if we really do mean a letter, then we've terminated numeric mode, and it's read as B. It's not standing alone, so it can't be read as the word but. We'll talk about fractions, time, money, etc. Later on, either in this session or in future sessions. When a period, or decimal point, is followed by a number, it precedes the numeric prefix, that's 3456, unless it is clear that it is a decimal point. So in the first example here, we have piano sonata number 16. Obviously, that's not point 16. That period belongs to the abbreviation for a number. So that then is treated as a period outside of the numeric mode set by the numeric mode indicator. By the way, you'll notice, I forgot, the period is a period, a dot is a dot no matter what. So as I said, probably in the first session, a dot is a dot no matter where, no matter what. So even though we're talking about decimal points, it's still a dot in print. So whether it's a period in print or a decimal point in print or .com in print, it's all the same print symbol, so it's the same Braille symbol. The difference here is just whether it goes before the numeric indicator or after the numeric indicator, but it's still the same dot configuration. So moving on with this example, again, it's K period 545. It's not 0.545. So that dot, that period, will go before the numeric mode indicator. But if we're obviously talking about 0.375, then that's a decimal point, so we would put that after the numeric mode indicator. Here's the tricky part about all of this. We kind of get numbers. Numbers are numbers, right? So that's pretty simple. However, the numeric mode indicator also sets in motion grade 1 mode. So we have 2 different modes starting at the same time with the same indicator. Grade 1 mode, when it's set by the numeric indicator, is terminated by the space, hyphen, or dash. We're pretty familiar with that phrase, or explicitly with the grade 1 terminator. While grade 1 mode is in effect, a grade 1 indicator is not required after that numeric indicator unless a lowercase letter A through J follows a digit, decimal point, or comma. And that makes sense. It's not really a rule that we have to memorize if we just realize what's happening. That the letters A through J, of course, would look like a number, a numeral, if we didn't have a grade 1 indicator in front of it. So for an example is 22B. Obviously, if we didn't have a grade 1 indicator in front of that B, it would be read as 2, and we would read it as 222. We don't want that, so we need the grade 1 symbol indicator there. The 22 capital B, though, the capital indicator can't be a number. It numeric mode is stopped actually because of that indicator. So we don't need any grade 1 indicator for that because capital B can't be mistaken for a number. And likewise for a P. A P can't be mistaken for a number, so we don't need a grade 1 indicator for that. In the old code, we did need a letter sign, they called it, a letter sign after anything that followed a number. But in UEBA, again, keep in mind what the grade 1 mode indicator is for. It's to prevent confusion. It's not just supposed to be a standard thing that we just put there just because. Some more examples just to make the point. Starting off with 32, nice regular number. But if we wanted 3B, again, we would need that grade 1 symbol indicator in front of that to prevent it from being read as 32. It's read as 3B. The next example, 3 capital B, again, the capital sign terminates numeric mode. Capital B can't be mistaken for a number. We don't need a grade 1 mode indicator there. Same thing with 3M, and M can't be mistaken for a numeral. 4.2, the numeric mode carries through the decimal point, no problem. 3.B, or however you want to say that, 3 period B. 4 period, numeric mode carries through the decimal point or the period there. So we do need a grade 1 indicator there, so to prevent that from being read as 2. We want it read as a B. But 4 point capital B, don't need a grade 1 indicator there because of the capital sign. And 4 point M, M can't be mistaken for any number, so we don't need a grade 1 indicator there. While a grade 1 mode is in effect, contractions may not follow a number. So if we have very common situation, houses for lease, that 4 is represented with the number 4, not FOR. And so numeric mode has just been set, so as grade 1 mode, that means no contractions after that number. If we did want to start using contractions again, then we need that explicit grade 1 mode terminator indicator after the 4, and then we could go ahead and use contractions. In this example, you can see using that would take up one more cell of space there, so it's actually better just to uncontract it. But it's the transcriber's choice or the writer's choice whether to use that or not. Just be aware that space may be a consideration. This rule about contractions not following a number also affects things like ordinal numbers, first, fourth, fifth, that sort of thing. In the old code, we could contract those endings, but in UEB, we can't, so we will spell them out. So he came fourth in the race, then we need to uncontract TH. Again, grade 1 mode is terminated by a hyphen or a dash, thus allowing contractions to be used again, because numeric mode is stopped and so is grade 1. Therefore, a letter or letters that could be read as a contraction will need the grade 1 indicator again. So if we have this 6-can pack under seat 6C, in the first instance, we have that hyphenated expression. The hyphen terminates numeric mode. It also terminates grade 1 mode. So that means the C there is standing alone. It has a hyphen on one side, a space on the other, so then it's read as the word can. In the second example of that hyphenated expression, we have, since it can be read as can, still we have a hyphen on one side, period and space on the other side. It's standing alone. Numeric mode is stopped, so is grade 1 mode, and so in order to prevent that from being read as the word can, we want it read as the letter C, so we need a grade 1 simple indicator in that instance. Next example, 20 hyphen year period with a YR. It's standing alone with hyphen on one side, space on the other. The hyphen terminates numeric mode and grade 1 mode, and so we have that would be read as the word your, the short form your, except for now we put that grade 1 symbol indicator in front of it, so it's read as the letters YR. Remember, for short forms, we only need the grade 1 symbol indicator, not the grade 1 mode or word indicator there. That's the rule. However, if there wasn't a hyphen there, then grade 1 mode is still in effect. So we have the numeric mode indicator to 20, and then YR, it can't be mistaken for anything else. We don't need a grade 1 mode indicator there. Okay, now we'll talk about this new thing called a numeric space. Spaces within a number should be represented with these 10 symbols that are shown on the screen. Again, UEB considers these things units with a prefix and a root. It doesn't consider these to be numerals with a .5 added to it. The whole thing, the two cell Braille sign composition is considered one Braille sign, one unit. If it is not clear that a space is a separator in a single number, it should be treated as an ordinary space and the numeric indicator repeated. So what we need to look for is this a single number with spaces dividing up the segments of numbers, or is this a bunch of individual numbers with spaces in between? For instance, an ISBN number is a single number. It's not, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate numbers. It's one single number with spaces in between different segments. So to indicate that space, we will put a .5 in there with no spaces on either side of it because this is all one number. So in those print spaces, we're putting in a .5. A phone number, for the record, is considered one number. So if we have a phone number, this is from somewhere else other than the United States, obviously, but they have spaces in between the segments. And so the first part, we have 61 in parentheses, and then, so that's a separate number. Then we have just a regular space, and then 3, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's considered one number. So this example might be a little bit confusing because we're not used to phone numbers being written this way, but a 61 apparently is its own individual unit because it's in parentheses. Then we have a space, and then the rest of the number. So for us with an area code, we would have the area code with a space if there is one in print, and then we would start up numeric mode. And if there was a space in between, say, the prefix and the main number, then we would have a numeric space indicator of .5 in between those two segments. For dates and time, when transcribing dates, time, coinage, ordinal numbers, postal codes, or telephone numbers, we follow print punctuation and the order of symbols. So if you're a transcriber, then you braille what you see. For a date with slashes between the different time periods, 7/11/59, slash is not one of those things that numeric mode carries through, so we need to start up numeric mode with after each slash. Again, that's different than what we had just recently with EBAE. Before that change, we did do it this way, so we're actually going back a step or two to what we used to do before what we used to do. If we have hyphens, same thing. A hyphen terminates numeric mode, so we need to start it up after each hyphen. 7-11-59, we need the numeric mode indicators in each of those segments. But a period does not stop numeric mode, so we don't need to start up numeric mode again after each period. So we can have 7:11 with no new numeric indicator, then another period, and again no new numeric indicator there for the 59. If you ask me, that might make me prefer periods from now on for dots. That looks great for business cards, by the way, to save space. If we have 1960s with an apostrophe S after the number, or any year or something like that, like a plural number, that apostrophe terminates numeric mode and grade 1 mode, or excuse me, no, just numeric mode. But the apostrophe S can't be mistaken for anything. It can't be mistaken for a numeral, so we don't need a grade 1 indicator there for that. However, if you have 70s and 80s, then you need the apostrophe representing the missing numbers outside of the numeric indicator, because the apostrophe does terminate numeric mode. So we wouldn't want to have a numeric mode indicator and then immediately stop it with an apostrophe. So that is outside of the numeric mode indicator. And that's just like Nemeth, for you Nemeth people out there. It's the opposite of what we did in EBAE. In EBAE, that apostrophe was considered to represent numbers, which it does, and so it came after the numeric indicator. but in UEB, the apostrophe stops numeric mode, so it's outside of the the year or number or whatever it is. And again, the S there can't be mistaken for a number, so we don't need a grade 1 mode indicator there. Times then are going to look a little different. 10:30 a.m. a colon is something that terminates numeric mode, so we need to start up numeric mode again for the minutes part of the time. This is almost like Nemeth, but again, keep your code straight. If you are in Nemeth, you will need that punctuation indicator. We don't have such a thing in UEB, so we just have the colon. A colon is a colon no matter what, no matter where, so we don't need anything special designating it as a colon. So it's just 10 and then colon, numeric mode indicator again because the colon just terminated numeric mode, and then 30 for the minutes. It's possible to have a space numeric indicator so that if you're vertically aligning numbers, the placeholders will all line up so that you can go vertically down the columns. Again, this is not what you would do in Nemeth. This is only for non-Nemeth situations. For instance, a mystery novel with a receipt in it, or some sort of personal finance thing or something like that. Something where you're not in Nemeth. Nemeth has its own rules for spatial alignments. This is only for UEB. In UEB, you line up the numeric indicators and you put in as many spaces as you need in order to line up the value places. Value places. So the decimal points line up, 1 column lines up, 10 column lines up, all of that. So this is what you would do for that sort of situation. And this is one of the few instances, a numeric passage is one of the few instances where I'm going to show you something in order that you don't use it. So that's kind of funny, but I want you to be aware that it exists so that you don't flip through the code book someday and say, oh, I didn't know we were supposed to use this. Well, you're not. So there is such a thing as a numeric passage indicator in UEB. Now, UEB has a math component to it, and in the math segment of it, and it's in a different volume, but it's still very much the UEB code. They just pulled it out and made it into its separate volume, so that those who don't need to work with technical material, math and like math and science, wouldn't have to bother with that in their code book. But it's still, the two volumes together are the UEB code book. And in that technical part of the code book, there is something called numeric passage indicator, and it comes in handy for those who are using UEB math. But for those of us who are using Nemeth, we will hardly ever use this numeric passage indicator. But it does exist. So a numeric passage indicator has two prefixes of dots 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the usual configuration for a terminator, what's being terminated, dots 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the dot 3. The numeric passage indicator is not used in I should read what I say here. Numeric indicators are not used in a numeric passage, and any lowercase letter A through J is preceded by a grade 1 indicator. So it works just like the capitals passage indicator, where once you set capitals passage mode, you didn't use capitals anywhere else in that passage until you terminated it. So the numeric passage indicator is the same thing. If we have start off the numeric passage indicator and then we have all these numbers in there, then we don't keep using the numeric mode indicator with a single prefix of dot 356 because we've already set numeric passage mode. But again, as I understand it, at this point in time, we will not be using that very much at all, especially if we are a Nemeth region, and BANA will come out with guidance eventually about specifically how we should use this and when. A word about dividing long numbers. In general, just like words, we should avoid dividing long numbers between Braille lines if we can help it. Unless, considerable space can be saved. If you need to break it, then break it in a logical place, either at a numeric space or after a comma, which is being used as a separator between the numeric segments. Don't just do it between two digits or let the computer wrap it around wherever it may. Be aware of what is happening and divide it at a logical place. You wouldn't see that in print, and we shouldn't expect Braille readers to suddenly break off in the middle of a segment. If you have to divide a number, try to divide it in as few places as possible. This may mean sometimes you could start it on the same line as the previous text. Sometimes it may mean bringing it down. But if it's going to take 3 lines and you can save it, bring it down to 2, because depending on where you start it, either the same line as the text or by bringing it down, by all means do that so that it's only broken up once instead of 2 or 3 times. When you are dividing long numbers, use the one cell line continuation indicator, .5, at the end of the line. That's a very long label for a single dot, but that's what it is, the one cell line continuation indicator. A numeric indicator is not required after that because you've already said to the reader, this number is continuing on to the next line. So suppose you have this long number, this might be, I can't remember if this is what you call a Google, or anyway, it's a very long number, one with a whole bunch of zeros after it. It's obviously not going to fit on a Braille line, so you continue with your 100, comma 000, comma until you can't anymore on a line. We're dividing it at a logical place after a comma, and then we have our one cell line continuation indicator with that .5. Continue on with the next line. We do not need a numeric indicator on that second line because, again, we've already told the Braille reader that this number is continuing by using that .5. Suppose we have a really long number that also uses, does not use commas, it uses spaces in between the segments. Now, we just said we use a .5 for indicating spaces, and now we've said that we use a .5 for indicating a line continuation as well. So is that confusing? No. When the division takes place at a numeric space, use the 2-cell line continuation indicator at the end of the line. So before we were just using the 1-cell line indicator, continuation indicator, now we're using 2-cell line continuation indicator. As I said, it's a very long label. And so the reader is reading along with a single .5, that means there's a space, single .5, space, space, space. Then you get to the 2-cell line continuation indicator. And again, UEB technically considers that 2-cell line continuation indicator a unit. In my mind, 1 cell represents the space and 1 cell represents the line continuation indicator, but that's just how I remember it. So if that helps you, go ahead and think of it that way as well. But just remember that UEB is going to consider that as a 2-cell unit, and that's why it's called a 2-cell line continuation indicator. Okay, moving on to fractions. There are 2 kinds of fractions in UEB, simple and generic. We'll talk about simple first. A simple numeric fraction is numeric. It contains only digits, decimal points, commas, or separator spaces that are part of that number. It has the numbers arranged vertically or nearly so. We'll talk about what that means in a bit. And when we have simple fractions, we use the simple numeric fraction line symbol, another long label. It's the same fraction line that we've used all along, dots 3, 4. Numeric mode continues through this symbol. This is one of those things that was on that list of things that numeric mode carries through. So for simple fractions, here is the example of vertical or nearly so. So they might be vertically aligned, 1 horizontal line and then 2 for the numerator and denominator. They're directly on top of each other. So we have the numeric mode indicator, .1 representing 1, the simple fraction line indicator there, dots 3, 4. Numeric mode continues through that, so we don't need to start up numeric mode again. And then we have dots 1, 2 representing 2 because of that numeric mode indicator. Nearly so means that we have 1 slightly higher than the 2 with a diagonal line through them. And that is represented the same way in Braille, whether it's completely horizontal fraction line or a diagonal fraction line with the numerator and denominator at different levels. They're both represented by the numeric mode indicator, and then the numerator, the simple fraction line, and then the denominator. For mixed numbers, they're going to be a little different than what we have done in EBAE. We used to stick a hyphen in between the whole number and the fraction, and we did not start up the number sign again with the fraction. In UEB, we have the numeric mode indicator for the whole number, and again for the fraction part of it. No space or hyphen in between the two. And then we have linear fractions, which may or may not be fractions. It might be just two numbers between a diagonal line. But even if it's a fraction, like a lot of teachers on worksheets or self-published cookbooks, that sort of thing, they'll put the fractions right, the numerator and denominator on the same level, just because it's the quick and easy way to do it, and it might be too complicated to make it look like an actual fraction. So you just do 1/2. UEB considers that to be two numbers on either side of a slash, so that's how we're treating it. We have the numeric mode indicator, and in this case the .1 representing 1, then a slash. The slash terminates numeric mode, so we have to start up numeric mode again for the denominator, or the second number. If there are two individual whole numbers that look just like that linear fraction, separated by a slash, then we treat it the same way. So the way we treat fractions is dependent on whether what print looks like, actually. So if they're on the same level, then no matter whether it's a linear fraction proper or it's just two numbers separated by a slash, we're treating it the same way. So we do the first number, slash, numeric mode again, and then the second number. So if we have 24/7, 50/50, 20/20, anything like that, we're not trying to figure out if that's a fraction or two separate numbers separated by a slash. We braille what we see. So what we see is a number slash number. That takes care of simple fractions. Then we'll talk about general fractions. General fractions are anything else other than numeric. So if the fraction is not entirely numeric, meaning it has something other than a numeral, a decimal point, comma, or numeric space, then the general fraction indicators should be used. And with those, you do need a grade 1 mode indicator if necessary. And often, most of the time, actually, it will be necessary. So a general fraction line is different. We have dots 4, 6, that's a prefix, and then the root 3, 4. The general fraction open indicator is dots 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. General fraction close indicator is dots 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of course, those look like fractions, so that's why we would need grade 1 mode indicator if we're in contract and braille. So a couple of examples for that. We have an x over y. Those aren't numbers, those are variables. So we need the general fraction indicators and the fraction line. Again, that opening general fraction indicator looks like the contraction for OF, and of course the closing one looks like WITH. We don't want any of this fraction to be read as contractions. Not that the x and y can, they're not standing alone, but for the sake of ease of reading, transcriber's choice, we are saying that this whole thing should be read as grade 1 mode, no contractions. So grade 1 word indicator there, 2 cells of dots 5, 6 for the entire thing. In the next example, it would be beneficial, save space, to have contractions for the words distance and time. This is a general fraction because distance and time are words, not numbers or commas or decimal points or anything like that. So this is a general fraction. In this case, we only want the opening general fraction indicator to not be read as a contraction, so we're putting a grade 1 symbol indicator in front of that. And then that's as far as grade 1 mode goes. It's just the symbol. Then we can use contractions for the word distance. We use the general fraction line indicator there. That's 4, 6, and then 3, 4. We can still use contractions for time, TIME, but then that closing general fraction indicator looks like a contraction because we're in contracted mode now. So we need to say, no, don't read this as a contraction. Read this as a symbol. So we have a grade 1 symbol indicator there. Then it's read as a closing general fraction indicator. And that's it for numeric mode. Try your hand at the drills and or the homework session, and I will see you for session 6. Thank you.